Then take 1/2 cup of the salt and pepper mix and rub it into the skin of the chicken breast. Add a teaspoon of
hello
olive
everybody.
oil and
I'm
sprinkle
Jeff
a pinch
Arbuckle,
of cumin
B-Movie
over the entire
Proctologist,
dish.
and you're watching B-Movie Enema. Now, my trusty sidekick and companion, Nurse Disembody, is in the middle of a cooking tutorial for, well, not exactly who it's for, to be honest with you, but this all started when the conversation of cooking for oneself came up. I told Nurse Disembody that as a moderately average-looking guy, I knew the importance of being able to cook. That meant that I would have at least one more desirable quality in my arsenal of about 2 qualities. And by the way, the other quality? 13-inch hog. But I digress. When you have a face for radio, having a video program is really kind of dumb. It's also a good idea to maybe brace yourself for a life of mostly taking care of yourself in a solitary confinement situation that, quite frankly, we often find ourselves in. And it's also a good idea to not constantly eat out at restaurants, as that would prove to be a little bit of a strain on your wallet. Go to the grocery store, buy things that you can fix for yourself, and provide yourself leftovers that you can then eat for the next couple of days, and that is a winning strategy. Plus, chicks dig men who are willing to cook. It can also lead to playful situations with your partner that might involve cooking in the nude, or, as Nurse Disembody is currently doing, wearing only a cartoonishly large chef's hat, an apron, high heels, and nothing else.
No, I'm not. I'm fully clothed.
Anyway, my point is that when you have a moderate to severe case of unattractiveness, it's a good idea to know how to cook. It also helps to have a whole buttload of money and a 13-inch hog. What doesn't really help is to be a B-movie proctologist. I'm constantly up to my armpits in poop. And it's not exactly an appetizing career that I've made for myself. This week's movie is Microwave Massacre. It's about a guy named Donald who has a shitty wife who only wants to cook gourmet foods in a way to make themselves seem much more classy than they really are. And as if that's not enough, she also bought herself a giant microwave oven that seems to only make food even worse. After a drunken night of horror, Donald soon discovers a new taste for life in ways that he would not have expected. Now, Donald is played by stand-up comedian Jackie Vernon, and this proved to be his final film role before he passed away in 1987. But he wasn't in too many movies. As a comedian, Vernon was mostly known for slightly darker humor. The punchline would generally revolve around deadpan delivery and him being kind of on the short end of a stick, if you will. For example, he'd tell the joke, "We lived in a small town built on a one-way street, and if you miss it, you have to drive all the way around the world to get back." He'd also have recurring bits like showing vacation slides that typically resulted in something bad happening to him or some sort of misfortune. He also had a really bizarre sketch about trying to transform a watermelon into a house pet. But what he's mostly known for, probably by far, is being the voice of Frosty the Snowman in the CBS Christmas special that airs basically every year since its first release in 1969 or 68, something like that. There's not much more to say about this movie in particular as far as people who are in the movie. This is an extremely low budget and not particularly shy about being kind of raunchy and exploitative. I will note that production designer and art director Robert A. Burns does appear in this movie as a homeless man, although I don't think he's actually credited with his name, but Burns worked on some greats. He worked on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, Tourist Trap, Disco Godfather, The Howling, and Reanimator. And that's a hell of a list of great movies to watch. Now, we're going to get into this movie's first part, but real quick, during the course of this movie, we're going to see cannibalism and lots of nudity that's just kind of there to have some tits on the screen, to be honest with you. If that's not really your thing or something you don't really like to watch, or you're under the age of 18, or you're some sort of stuffy jerk, you might want to beat cheeks now or just skip ahead if this ugly mug talking to you through the computer screen is what you're really here for.
An important key to every dish is a heaping pile of butter and just a pinch of sugar. It will make your food more flavorful and pleasing to the taste buds. One of these days, you will likely discover that boiling lobsters is very dangerous if you remove the rubber bands from their claws. Those guys will not be shy about snipping at you those pinchers.
Well, I think it's safe to say that this movie maybe doesn't really have any interest in being all that good. So this first section of the movie introduces us to our main cast of characters. First, we have, of course, Vernon's Donald. He's a slob, kind of schlubby, he's overweight, kind of uncultured. He's a doofus with a real blue-collar, kind of uninteresting day job as a construction dude. At least I think. It seems like he's a construction dude, but I could be wrong on that. But we'll see a lot more of this character, of course, throughout this movie. And we also meet his wife, May. Now, May is desperate to be seen as more than just the jerk's wife. A jerk who has no class. No class whatsoever. She tries to kind of up her cooking game into a more high-class cuisine, and this really gives Donald troubles. And he's kind of tired of her cultural experience hobby of this new cuisine and this new taste palette that she's trying to form for them. And then we have a couple of real yucksters in Donald's work pals, Phil and Rosie. Now, Rosie is a white guy who acts like a cool jive dude, and Phil is a black dude who has no cool or rhythm to dance to, so he's got to get Rosie to kind of help him out. And if I'm being totally honest, it's kind of a decent joke. But this really isn't that much of a horror movie. It's a comedy that uses some exploitation and horror ideas to tell its story. So to have a subtle joke of a white guy who is cool like a black guy and a black guy who's dorky like a white guy, that's not too bad, but it does need to stay subtle and relatively consistent as far as not ever overtaking anything, if you will. But there's a lot of sex jokes in this movie, but I'm not really sure why. Within the first 3 minutes, we see a girl's tits pressed through a hole in a wooden fence, and a guy just starts, I guess, screwing her, I think. When Donald comes home, there's a bunch of sexcapades at the neighbors. There's a hot neighbor that he has, a hot blonde neighbor girl or whatever. But I'd say the guys going to the strip club to get a beer after their shift is gratuitous, but it's the most normal use of nudity in this whole damn movie. So let's get back to the comedy of Microwave Massacre. And this seems to play directly to Vernon's sensibilities as his stand-up act. He's got this kind of put-upon guy, sort of down on his luck sort of character. His wife is a pill. He can't get a decent lunch or dinner. His friends and coworkers are just watching boobs and hitting on girls left and right. This is obviously a vehicle for Vernon, but he's not really the hero. He's the doormat. And I think at this point we should probably look at the director of this film, Wayne Berwick. Now, Berwick's father, Irv, made some decently memorable kind of B movies back in the 50s and the 60s. And Berwick would ultimately first go to Europe to tour in a band, and he got the chance to direct this script. Now, originally, the film was meant to be a little bit more of a darkly subtle and understated in its comedy with creepy elements. However, 2 weeks before filming began, Berwick suddenly discovered that the script had changed. The film was no longer the darkly comedic film that it was. Instead, it was this comedy that had all of the jokes kind of turned up to about, I don't know, 35 on the dial. And it was just 90 pages of one-liners and somewhat discombobulated comedy sketches. Now, that's probably a real good way to doom your movie. Alright, so our movie's off to an interesting start. Donald has killed his wife May after coming home drunk and having enough of her nagging and her bullshit cooking. So I'll get us back into the movie while Nurse Disembodied continues working on her wonderful culinary masterpiece. Now, so here's where the real meat of the movie comes into play. Donald has killed his wife, doesn't remember doing so, finds her stuffed in her prized microwave, decides to cook her so I guess he can carve her up for easier storage, and then stashes her in the refrigerator. Now, this leads to Donald now accidentally eating part of her hand when he was going for other leftovers when he was looking for a midnight snack, and realizing he downright loves the taste of people. Now, maybe my actual favorite scene in the entire movie takes place during this segment. First and foremost, Donald, who had been tired of May trying to become a better, classier cook, has himself become a great, classy cook by microwaving May. His co-workers, Rosie and Phil, want to try this new sandwich that Donald seems very happy with in his new lunches since May and he got separated. So what's he do? He realizes that he can make sure that his supply of food, and really good food, never runs out. So he meets this hooker, right? Because when you need to make sure you stock up on food, you go see the hooker. Okay. He takes her home and seems a little gun shy about doing anything with this girl. And this comes into play a little bit later about something about not being able to perform sexually or whatever. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure that this movie actually considered this first or just kind of threw it in for shits and giggles. I don't know. But anyway, he eventually does start having sex with her and then kills her, cuts her up, saves her in the freezer with May's body, and now he's a psychotic cannibal killer needing to kill more women. But is it that great of a scene? In comparison with the rest of these fucking scenes, I guess so. But the scene that in particular that I really like is when he talks to the girl after she's been bounced from the bar that he regularly visits. Donald seems a little less like a cartoon character in a bad comedy, and a little bit more like a real person in a bad comedy. And I'm not sure yet if he's ready to outright consume this girl, or if he's just looking for companionship, but he decides that he would like to be kind to a girl who just got kicked out for harassing men in the bar. Now, again, I'm not sure if I'm just polishing a turd here, or if this scene that I just referenced is actually kind of working. Either which way, he does ultimately decide to eat her up. Yum. Now, I first saw this movie on Bizarre TV. Now, that was a channel on the Roku that was run by the beloved Mistress Rhonda. And I've written about this channel a lot on the blog over the years. And I got a Roku in the fall of 2015 or so, and it wasn't long before I discovered Bizarre TV, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing movies I've never heard of, thought maybe I'd seen at one point in time and completely forgot, or got to finally see something that I either always intended to, but hadn't, or made some sort of mental note when somebody said, hey, have you ever seen this peculiar movie? And I just never saw it. Now, it was a great way to get a crash course in exploitation and gore films at the exact time that I was interested in those things. And you also got to see a lot of shorts made by indie filmmakers too. And it's a channel that B-Movie Enema owes a lot to. Now, after Mistress Rhonda passed away, I believe it was in 2018, the channel quietly disappeared a few months later. However, not too long after that came OtherWorlds TV, and I've got a lot to thank them for in terms of keeping Mistress Rhonda's vision of a channel free for all up and running. Now, if you've got a Roku and haven't checked out OtherWorlds TV yet, then get on it. The previous 8 fucking episodes have all name dropped this channel somewhere in the episode, so what are you waiting for already? So let's get back to Microwave Massacre and the final act of Donald's descent into homicidal and cannibalistic murder and cookery. We'll also get Nurse Disembody's divine dish as well.
Yep. My culinary masterpiece is nearly finished baking.
Alright, well, that was a movie. I mean, that was Microwave Massacre. It is technically a movie. Look, there's no way to slice this. The movie is batshit insane. As I mentioned earlier, the movie was originally a creepy and darkly comedic movie. Then all of a sudden, it was this strung together script of quick hit one-liners and skits. While there are flashes of interesting ideas and things that could basically work, it got turned into a far more over-the-top joke. But the movie jumps from one joke to the next as well. It feels like the kind of one-liners your crappy uncle just can't stop telling in rapid succession at Thanksgiving. It's like a group of people sat around a writer's room and everyone had to give one good idea and one bad idea every time, every single time, every goddamn time they chose the bad idea. And the movie bounces around from a guy who is this loser with a bad marriage to a guy who now likes to eat his sorrows literally. But why is he doing that? What's he got problems with? Well, apparently he's impotent. But we don't get that until halfway through this movie. However, he overcomes that when he realizes that he can make it with a woman if he thinks about eating them. Then, sometime later, we learn that he either needed or got a pacemaker. Then, Donald dies off screen. No, he really does. He gets off-screened. In an epilogue, we find out that the microwave was wired wrong and it would basically kill anyone with a pacemaker, as if a simple moving man who is clearing out Donald's house would necessarily know that. Anyway, so what fucking gives with this movie? Seriously. We are only told he needs a pacemaker, but then there's no inclusion of any scenes of him needing something for his heart, it being implanted, or any of that. Yes, there's a scene with this batshit bullshit doctor, but it's just kind of there. It's also just so many bad jokes, just one after another for the entire run of this movie. Oh, and May's decapitated head all of a sudden has glowing eyes and is sentient. I mean, that's a new development in the final shot of this fucking movie. Ultimately, this is a movie that I could never recommend to anyone because it is, at times, a real groan fest. The jokes fall flat on their fucking faces. The only joke that I can get behind is the swapping of races for Rosie and Phil and how that plays kind of consistent, but also thankfully subtle the whole way through. And I'm left with this, with just a couple of final thoughts on this movie, to be perfectly honest with you. First, this movie is almost a satire on the 70s exploitation and gore films that were prevalent at the time that this movie actually was made and released, which was 1979. It didn't really get a full public release until 1983, but I digress. I have to wonder if the original script was more of a satire and some of that still shows through. Second, I am really curious how much changed once Jackie Vernon was hired to do the movie. I'm curious if he was a driving force to rewrite it and if he forced the changes into the movie. Again, lots of bad jokes, lots of naked women, and some weird sex jokes are all over this. Was that a writer doing that, or was that what Vernon wanted to do? Oh yeah, that reminds me. There's a moment in this movie in which Donald sees his hot neighbor using a vibrator like a garden spade. Now that's odd.
Dinner is ready.
Oh, excellent, Nurse Disembody. Tell them where they can find all the B-Movie Enema stuff out there, and then we're going to take a look at that culinary masterpiece that you've come up with.
You can find all of Jeff's writings and upcoming episodes at www.bmovieenema.com. You can follow the page at Facebook and Twitter and check out episodes on YouTube. If you have a Roku, get OtherWorlds TV and check him out along with all the other hosts that appear there on weekends.
All right, thank you. So let's see what we have here. What the holy living balls of fuck is that? What is that?
What did you expect?
God, what is this?
I'm a disembodied voice and another figment of your imagination.
It's probably going to taste all right.